Hello everyone and welcome to today's WorkSafe Tasmania Month webinar. I'm Stephanie from WorkSafe Tasmania. Before we start, please take a moment to read the following slide about information today. To interact in today's webinar, please use the question window on your control panel to type and submit questions for today's presenter. Questions will be answered throughout today's webinar. Presenter and moderator webcams will not be used during today's presentation, and today's webinar is being recorded. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Sharon King from Palliative Care Tasmania. Sharon is an allied health professional with a Master's in Dietetics, a Cert 4 in Training and Assessment, and experience working in clinical, community and private settings. She has worked on palliative care, rehabilitation and oncology wards. This piqued her interest in palliative care and improving overall quality of life of patients and supporting the family loved ones. Sharon's passion is educating and working with the community to improve resources from within. She has worked for Palliative Care Tasmania for 7 years and has enjoyed the ongoing opportunities to work in this sector. Welcome, Sharon.
Thanks for that, Stephanie. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I also extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here with us today. Also, just to let you know, the nature of my work at Palliative Care Tasmania can raise raw emotions, and Palliative Care does not offer a counselling service. However, we can provide information on available services and support centres within your local region. Of course, today what we are talking about is going to be a little bit general in nature. This is more an information topic to allow you to go to the resources to help you. And so I always ask people to seek specific advice for their individual situations. At the end of this talk as well, I'll provide the link or have it sent to Stephanie to send out to all of those that have registered today, so you have these toolkits to refer back to later. So, Stephanie said, my name is Sharon and it's really good to be here today. So let's look at what we're actually going to be covering. So we know that there is an increasing number of people in our workplaces who are impacted by a life-limiting illness. Some individuals may be diagnosed with a life-limiting illness and others may become responsible for caring for a loved one. Death is an uncomfortable topic of conversation in our society, and for many, dealing with it in the workplace is not easy either, whether for the affected worker or the HR professionals or managers and teams. So what we're going to do today is help managers and HR professionals to learn how to have helpful, practical and sensitive discussions and get guidance and information to help plan for dealing with life-limiting illness in the workplace. And for employees, we're going to help people with a life-limiting illness to help learn how to make informed decisions on whether and how long to keep working and initiate productive conversations about working with a life-limiting illness. So like I said, today I'm going to be working through the two toolkits you can see here on the screen, and they've been developed specifically to tackle this issue and to understand your rights as an employee or as a manager. And these resources will be provided, as I said, in the link to all that are attending later. So I understand who exactly is here today. I've got a little poll. I just want to know if you're here as a manager or a HR professional, or are you here as an employee? So I've got the first poll.
So we'll close the poll shortly. I'll close the poll, Sharon, and share the results.
Okay, thanks. So managers, so we've got 67% and about 33% as employees. Thank you so much for doing that for me. Like I said, it's really good to know who I'm talking to. And when I ran this last time, we actually had about the same ratio. So that is interesting. I'm just trying to move this. There we go. I'm just trying to get this to move ahead for us. So we're all on the same page. Let's start with the understanding of what palliative care actually is. So palliative care is care that is provided for a person with a life-limiting illness where the primary goal is to optimize quality of life over extension of life. It aims to alleviate not only pain, but also stress, grief, uncertainty, and other forms of emotional distress by openly talking about and planning for the end-of-life experience. It emphasizes the needs and wishes of the person being cared for and seeks to help them live as actively and fully as possible until death. It recognizes how involved the person's loved ones and community will be and works to integrate them into systems of support and the person's treatment. So palliative care is seen to be as an active, holistic care and delivered in a proactive way. So we live in a society that doesn't really feel comfortable talking about dying, let alone planning for what kind of care you'd like to receive at the end of your life. Unless people have had direct experience with palliative care, they tend not to know what it means or the kind of supports it can offer. This lack of knowledge is often shared by family and loved ones who can be integral in decision making. So death is an experience we will all go through, and it is important that we think about the end stage of our own lives, talk about it with our loved ones, and plan for it. When faced with the prospect of our own death or the death of someone we are caring for, most people find it very difficult to articulate their wants and needs, and this includes in the workplace. So the first part of today's presentation is going to focus on the toolkit which has been written specifically for the employee. When you have been given a terminal diagnosis, we're referring to that as a life-limiting illness, this information can also be relevant to employees who have the responsibility of caring for somebody with such a diagnosis. So this toolkit provides users with resources to make an informed decision on whether and how long to keep working, make plans about your legal and financial situation and your healthcare preferences, initiate productive conversations about working with a life-limiting illness, find other resources to support and advise you throughout your experience, and understand what support you can access if you're caring for somebody with a life-limiting illness. So this toolkit is not intended to be a complete resource. Rather, it's meant to give you a starting point to discover things you may need to plan for and to explore support options that are right for your situation. So I have another question for you here. Stephanie's going to put up a poll, and my question is life-limiting illness or being a carer discussed openly in your workplace, and do you feel employee rights are understood well?
We'll close the poll shortly.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll close the poll, Sharon, and share the results.
Okay. So 20% think it is openly discussed in the workplace, 30% no, and 50% unsure. So a little difference from last time. So I think what that tells me overall is that we have a little bit of work to do and need to provide a little bit better understanding. So hopefully you walk away today just at least knowing where to turn to more to find that information for both the employees and the employers. So I better get on with it then. There we go. Sorry, it's being a little touchy with flicking forward. So sorry if I'm appearing a little bit slow. But so let's have a look at your rights at work. So when living with a life-limiting illness, a lot of things, as I said before, are uncertain or unknown. But there are some things we do know about your rights in the workplace. You do not have to tell your employer you are ill although sharing information with them may be helpful in managing your circumstances. You do have to tell your employer about anything that will affect your ability to do your job. You also have to tell them anything that could reasonably cause a health and safety risk for yourself or other people. You do have paid and unpaid sick leave or personal leave entitlements or equivalent entitlements as a carer. You will have to give your employer notice regarding personal or carer's leave as soon as it is practical to do so. You will also have to provide evidence such as medical certificate or a letter from any treating physician that outlines ongoing treatment or care needs. You cannot be discriminated against because you have an illness or you are a carer. You may ask for reasonable adjustments to your work to accommodate your illness or caring responsibilities, and adjustments will be viewed on a case-by-case basis. Your employer may have reasonable business grounds to not grant some of all or all of the requested adjustments. The full extent of your rights will be governed by your employment status, any enterprise agreement in place, and the state or territory in which you work. You should always seek specialised advice relevant to your own circumstances, of course, as well. So employers are legally obligated by the Disability Discrimination Act of 1992 to make reasonable adjustments to accommodate employees with serious illness, provided they do not cause an unjustifiable hardship to the business. So adjustments could be administrative, environmental, or procedural, and they could be temporary or long-term. They might include making minor changes to your work duties, reducing your work hours, approving flexible working arrangements, or providing additional equipment. Not all jobs can accommodate adjustments, and if you're unable to perform the core aspects of your job, then being dismissed is unlikely to be considered discriminatory. Seek advice about your situation if you're unsure or believe you have been discriminated against. You can go to the Fair Work Ombudsman website for more information on unfair dismissal. So when we're looking at personal leave, you must, if you are asked, an employer must, if asked, provide you with all your leave entitlements, including annual leave, personal carers leave, and possible long service leave. You can take as much personal leave as you have accumulated if you are not fit for work due to illness or injury. The minimum provisions for paid sick and carers leave, as well as information about unpaid sick leave, are covered again in the Fair Work Act 2009, and you can find out about both on the Fair Work Ombudsman website. So personal leave, as we've always known it as being sick leave, but it's also that's mostly known as personal leave, is also known as carers leave too, and comes out of your personal sick leave balance. So that comes under the Fair Work Act 2009, and carers leave is also available for immediate family members, your spouse, de facto partner, child, parent, grandparent, grandchild, sibling, or the child, parent, grandparent, grandchild, or sibling of a spouse or de facto partner, or any household member or any person who lives with you. So as remembering, personal leave can be taken for any of those people. Unpaid leave, so you're entitled to 2 days of unpaid carers leave for each occasion when a member of your immediate family or household requires care or support because of a personal illness, injury, or unexpected emergency. Workplace assistance. You have the right to request reasonable adjustments to your work to accommodate your caring responsibilities, provided the adjustments do not cause an unjustifiable hardship to the business. Accessing support. The good news is that there are many organisations providing support in all these areas. The support available will depend on your circumstances and the needs of the person receiving your care. So under the Fair Work Act 2009, when it comes to workplace grief, you are entitled to 2 days of compassionate leave each time an immediate family or household member dies or suffers a life-threatening illness or injury, and some workplaces may provide for more. If you are in a position where you can only take this short amount of leave, you are likely to have to return while still in the early stages of mourning. If you feel comfortable, it may help to discuss the situation with your employer and see if accommodations can be made. Consider discussing your needs and requesting more leave or a temporarily reduced workload to give yourself time to adjust. It is likely that little things may remind you of the person you are grieving and trigger your emotions. It is a good idea to identify a physical space you can go to if you need time alone and to let your supervisor know this may happen. Your co-workers are most likely going to try and show their support through words, sending flowers, making donations, or attending the funeral. You may well appreciate this support, or it may make you uncomfortable. Think about what support you would welcome and what would feel comfortable, and let your supervisor or colleagues know ahead of returning to work, as this can really help. Also preparing what to say in response to awkward conversations, acknowledging the intended support, but also making it clear that you don't want to talk about it may reduce your anxiety in the moment. Many organisations offer counselling through employee assistance programs, which provide employees with access to confidential professional support and other resources. These programs are designed to help deal with personal circumstances as well as workplace issues. These issues are likely to also apply if a close work colleague has died. So how about talking to your employer? As mentioned on the previous slide, you do not have to tell your employer you are ill. However, you do have some obligations. You do have to tell them about anything that will affect your ability to do your job. You also have to tell them about anything that could reasonably cause a health and safety risk to you or others. You do have paid and unpaid sick leave entitlements or equivalent entitlements as a carer, but what you tell your employer and in how much detail is entirely up to you. You know your workplace and the relationships you have within it. Take your time to decide what is best for you and to prepare yourself mentally on how to move forward and plan the conversations you have. Having some notes to take into any conversation with you may be helpful. Most people decide to discuss the situation with their employer, and there were things to consider on the next slide. So what do we need to think about? We need to think about what to tell them and how, like I said, how much information. Also, what do you want colleagues to know and how much? What changes to working arrangements might be useful for you? When and how often would you like further meetings? Don't feel compelled to agree to everything in that first meeting. You may need time to think about things. If you are the one who is ill, you may also wish to discuss a plan for exiting the workplace. Again, you have a right to privacy and should be able to choose a time frame that suits you while normal work function continues. Be mindful that keeping your situation a secret may cause you unnecessary stress. And if your employer is not aware of your circumstances, they may not provide consideration for any decline in work performance. So you need to also maybe think about telling your colleagues. This is possibly one of the biggest challenges when dealing with your situation early on. There is no perfect, best, or right way to let your colleagues know except the one that suits you. Having thought ahead and identified what kind of support would feel good to you and how much information you're happy to share and how you will maintain your boundaries and deal with your colleagues productively when the time comes to tell them. Like I said, being proactive and sharing as much information as you're comfortable with may be less stressful in the long run than potentially having office rumours and speculation go around you. So being prepared for those questions And also, like I said, considering those boundaries. So before making any decisions about how and when to leave work, it may be wise to get some professional financial advice, as there are many factors to consider. We know that everyone's situation is unique, from their job function and job satisfaction to their finances, debt, insurances, and family situation. However, common sources of financial support are work leave entitlements, early access to superannuation funds, total and permanent disability insurance provided in superannuation benefits, and government agency support. It's also important to think about end-of-life planning. It's important to document your healthcare wishes, how you want things to be handled if you are no longer to have a say. So that's called advanced care planning. And advanced care planning is a process of reflection, discussion, and communication that enables a person to plan for their future medical treatment and other care for a time when they are not competent to make or communicate decisions for themselves. The legal document for advanced care planning is called an advanced care directive. So again, I have a question for you all here today. Who here knew that you could guide medical treatment you do and do not want in an advanced care directive? You can just pop that into the chat. I was just curious of who did and who didn't, because often we know about wills and those documents around finances, but few people are aware of, like I said, guiding their own medical treatment at end of life. And for those who aren't aware, I'm just going to show a short film because this is a very important part of end-of-life decision making, and advanced care directives are actually going into legislation in a few weeks here in Tasmania, so it's good to be aware of. Right, so push forward. So it's the film now, Stephanie. Sorry, I won't go forward. There we are.
Oh, sorry about that.
All right. Thanks for playing that for me, Stephanie. Appreciate it. So now we all know a little bit more about end-of-life decision-making for treatment preferences. All right, I'm going to step forward. Oh, there we go. That's what I want. So now we've talked about treatment preferences. I'm going to talk a little bit more about legal and financial planning. So we know that making decisions about your financial and material wealth to provide for your care and comfort through and after the end of life may also require the appointment of a third party to make decisions on your behalf, so a decision maker. So as we saw in that film just now, you might want to substitute decision maker for treatment, and you might want to substitute decision maker for legal and financial planning. They don't need to be the same person. They, like, somebody might know more about health treatments, and that might be your substitute decision maker for end of life treatments, and somebody you know may have more information and understanding on legal and financial matters. So that way you can have that person as that decision maker, or they can be the same, doesn't matter. You will need to speak to a solicitor to prepare your documents, where you can discuss the extent of the powers and when they come into force and any directions you wish to see enacted. Be aware that without an enduring power of attorney in place, should you be incapacitated, no one can deal with your affairs on your behalf. So we know that having a will is arguably one of the most important things you can do for yourself and a family. A will legally protects your spouse, partner, children, and assets, and spells out exactly how you would like things handled after you die. Appendix A that I've got here on the screen is in the toolkit and provides a guide to assist you in what you might need. Like I said, they've also got resources and links to help you find the appropriate support within the toolkit and at the end of that. So now we've discussed everything for employees. We're going to go into now looking at the toolkit for managers and HR professionals. And as the majority of you here today are HR professionals, you will be looking after the employees. This is really important information for you to have. The number of deaths in Australia is estimated to double in the next 25 years as our population ages, and this means an increasing number of people will be impacted by terminal illness when still in the workplace. While some individuals who are working will be diagnosed with a life-limiting illness, a greater number will be becoming responsible for caring for a loved one with such an illness. As we mentioned before, given death is such an uncomfortable topic of conversation, many people in the workplace find themselves out of their depth and uncertain of how to manage their own emotions. This uncertainty impacts an employer's ability to provide information and practical support for their employees faced with a diagnosis of a life-limiting illness or caring for a relative. The second part of today's presentation, as I said, is going to focus on the toolkit, which has been written specifically for the managers and HR professionals. So what does this aim to help you with? It helps to provide users with resources to help develop policy on supporting staff, support and guidance for managers, how to support your employee, having difficult conversations, so initiating practical and sensitive discussions, looking further at grief and bereavement, and also looking at if your employee is a carer. If we have time, I do have a couple of little case studies at the end as well. So I have another question for you here. It's a poll asking, are there workplace policies and practices in place to support your employees now, and are they aware of them?
So I'll close the poll shortly.
Okay.
I'll close the poll, Sharon, and share the results.
So 22% say yes, 22% also say no, and 56% say unsure. So again, this tells me that there's a good reason for everyone's here today, because this needs to be a bit more work and become a bit clearer, because like I said, we don't want to start these conversations sometimes and we tend to ignore them until they're absolutely necessary and people need to know what is and what isn't available to them. So how do we go about developing policy? Let's flip ahead. So I'm trying to get the screen to flip ahead one, and there we go. So supporting an employee facing a life-limiting illness is a complex and a delicate task. When an employee has a life-limiting illness, the path from diagnosis through treatments to eventual death can take many months or even years. It is an individualised journey, and the support needs of the affected employee will evolve, requiring proper management, ongoing monitoring, and checking in with all involved. Some of the things we will need to be considered are how long a person should be allowed to work. What if an employee doesn't want anyone else to know they are ill? What supports are in place for staff faced with extra work and emotional distress when a colleague needs to be absent? And what is the impact of this issue on managers helping the affected employee? Supporting an employee facing, like I said, is a very, very delicate task, and there's going to be a bit of a fine line working out the balance. So there are some key questions and considerations. When going through these toolkits, you'll see the word communication used a lot. The HR professional, the line managers, and other managerial responsibilities for an employee with a life-limiting illness or caring for a loved one with such an illness will need to demonstrate a tremendous amount of emotional intelligence and leadership. It is reasonable to anticipate that those involved will need to be prepared to have clear and sensitive conversations about the extent to which the organisation can be flexible and what is fair and reasonable for all involved during what is understandably an emotional time. So consider these questions when formulating a policy to support and manage employees with a life-limiting illness in the workplace. So employee entitlements, or what are the organisation's legal obligations around leave? Assistance from the organisation, what resources and assistance is available? Case management, what about privacy, communication, adjustments to work, leave, and other staff? Supporting manager and team, what are the impacts on others and the manager? We know that typically staff will go to their team leader or senior manager to break the news of their situation. It's important that those who hear the news first have the necessary training and guidelines to handle this situation, and also be able to have the personal response and to handle the personal response and their own feelings. Regular reviews should take place, as this situation may go on for some time, and reviews should consider the affected employee as well as other staff around them. You may also need to consider how to manage after a colleague's death. It's sort of the thing from having policies about how and when staff will be notified of their colleague's death. Will the organisation offer leave or arrange shifts to support funeral attendance? Will the organisation offer counselling services to staff who may need it? How and when will clients, businesses, big contacts be informed? When and how will personal belongings held at the office be returned to the family? And when and how will organisational equipment and other assets formerly in the deceased possession be retrieved? So when devising policies, we need to keep the following in mind. Documents should be compliant with law and drafted in a way to afford business protection. Guidance should include advice for managers on benefit options for the person concerned, including early ill health retirement and access to any support services such as an employee assistance program or occupational health services. Include managers as they are central to discussions about work adjustments, work retention and workload. HR and employment law support in managing an employee with a progressive illness is crucial. Where is that support coming from and at what juncture will it be sought? This subject may become a complex HR issue and your organisation is tasked with exploring reasonable adjustments. So developing a working with life-limiting illness policy is a must for all employers. The policy will help managers to support staff through a particularly difficult time in their lives, lead to greater retention of employees and their accumulated knowledge and improve job satisfaction. It will also help managers through one of the more harrowing supervisory experiences. As you can see here on the page, we've got Appendix 1, which is the legislative framework, which can help provide information to assist in policy development. So how do we also support managers through this difficult time of navigating illness? To provide the necessary support to the line managers within your organisation, you need to equip them with the best possible information and provide new resources and training where necessary. This includes policy and training so managers can find and or seek input and direction on the following key aspects of the role. So as we said, they'll need to have information on the employee's rights and access to leave. The managers must have that access to accurate information. Producing effective communication for all staff. So communicating sensitively and certain details should only be shared with consent. Adjusting job responsibilities and managing absenteeism and return to work. The managers may need to have access to and be able to seek specialist advice for this. Staff morale and mental well-being. Managers need to maintain effective communication and demonstrate emotional intelligence to gauge the mental well-being of the staff. So looking at the points on the slide, do the managers here today feel you are well supported in the workplace when an employee is well? That's just something for you to consider. You can pop it into the chats if you want. But just something I want you to think about when you do look at these slides and what you might need to support you. As I said, it's about a balancing act. The role of the manager can be a complex one, and there are 3 areas of focus that need continual consideration. Thinking about the manager has the core responsibilities for the ongoing performance of their business line. They will need support and information on how to support the affected employee. And the manager will also have responsibility to other staff and will need to consider their own workloads and resilience in supporting that affected employee. So how do you approach that first conversation with somebody? A serious or life-limiting illness is never planned, so how a manager handles that first conversation with an employee who announces the news is extremely important. Training managers and preparing them for this eventuality is vital. Building capability is key to successfully managing this conversation and the emotions and responses that are inevitable at this important moment. This first meeting needs to take place in a private space without disruptions. Managers should aim to move the meeting should the conversation start in a less than ideal space. People who have just received the worst news possible have said the most important things others can do for them is to truly listen. This is also the best way for a manager to gather information without having to worry about what they can and cannot ask. A good listener encourages the speaker to elaborate and continue without having to prompt for specifics. Active listening will put the focus on the speaker. So acknowledge what they are saying and avoid agreeing or disagreeing. Answer questions as specifically as possible. Allow employee to go at their own pace. Provide reinforcement and reassurance, but don't interpret. Be honest about what you don't know. At the end, summarise key points and ensure both people have a clear understanding. There will be some pieces of information that will be key for the managers to get, and they need to be determined in that first meeting. So this is why we're having a clear understanding of the affected employee's wishes in terms of privacy is going to be important. What do they want their colleagues to know, if anything, and how do they want to communicate that news? We need to ask the affected employee what they need from you right now. Be prepared for any answer that comes your way and establish yourself as the point of contact for all communication. Where possible, the affected employee should be offered counselling via an employee assistance program. Appendix 2 that you can see here is a case management cover sheet which provides a comprehensive checklist and is available in the toolkit. So to support your employee, you will need to agree on a communication plan with that person, as mentioned before, and including what you will and will not mention to others. Do not assume the affected employee should stop working immediately. Many people with a serious illness often report that continuing to work helps them focus on things other than their health and provides them with important social contact. Be clear about actual job requirements. Does their illness impact on their ability to do the job? Give the affected employee every opportunity to demonstrate they can still perform their role without overmanaging them. At the same time, make sure you check in about how they are managing their workload. Avoid making assumptions about what the person can or cannot do. With their permission, you may need to check with a work health and safety specialist or the affected employee's doctor to correctly formulate the job function. Adjust work schedules in consultation with the employee and make reasonable modifications or adjustments to enable the person to continue doing their job. This is outlined further in the toolkit, read what to consider as an employer readjustments and what may be reasonable. Provide support, emotional and practical, and document the support that is given. At some point, a finish date will need to be discussed. What the triggers for that date might be is worthy of a discussion. Be mindful that leaving work will not be easy for some, and a well-planned and thought-out departure is in everybody's best interest. After the death of a colleague, staff may have feelings of guilt or regret, possibly due to their own feelings or actions within the workplace. In any given workplace, it is almost impossible to know what will happen. Key considerations will include how long has the affected employee been with the organisation, how strong were the relationships with staff, how long did their illness last, and what position did they hold. When an employee dies, there are some practical elements that will need to be considered. Informing the workplace, sensitive communication will be required. Informing clients, suppliers and customers to avoid embarrassment should they call to contact the deceased. Appoint someone to act as a liaison with the family and also to organise organisations' expression of sympathy cards, flowers, etc. Advise colleagues of funeral arrangements. The family's wishes must be respected in terms of what involvement they want from people at work. Managers should, where possible, allow staff time to attend the funeral. Recover work property from the family. This may be a car, laptop. So again, sensitivity around the timing is going to be required here. Return belongings to the family and settle any monies owed as soon as possible. These may be paid to the estate, so seek advice as appropriate. Remove the person's name from distribution lists, email lists, phone, message banks, etc. But let some time pass before making office and workspace changes. Colleagues need time to grieve and immediate change may cause staff to react badly to decisions in this regard. The timing of the employee's death will have a bearing on the management of these issues. There is no easy way to deal with the death of an employee and a colleague. It is an emotional time for everyone concerned. The reaction of staff will be somewhat influenced by whether the person was at work yesterday or has been absent for some time. Being a supportive employer can help ease stress levels and minimise periods of sick leave. If your organisation has an employee assistance program, make sure your staff know about the service and how to access it. If your organisation doesn't have an EAP, consider making counselling services available. Understanding grief is particularly relevant when it comes to supporting an employee who is as a carer. In handling the death of an employee, be mindful of setting precedents that the organisation will be expected to follow should this circumstance arise again. The important thing is to be consistent and offer the same amount of support to all employees. So tips to help staff deal with grief. What's helpful and what's not helpful? Be prepared. What is helpful is be prepared to just spend time listening and just be there for them. Ask if there is something they need rather than how they are feeling. Be patient. People who are grieving will often not know themselves what is helpful. Understand that grief can have an impact on a person's work performance and be mindful of any cultural sensitivities. Encourage people to take time out during the day to clear their heads and gather their thoughts. And don't be afraid to use the name of the person who died and to share memories and stories. What isn't helpful is don't tell people you know how they feel. You don't. We've all been there sometime when somebody said, I understand how you're feeling, and we know that they don't. No one else does. Don't use platitudes, for example, they've gone to a better place or they've had a good innings, and don't avoid them. If an employee is a carer, assisting an employee who is a carer is similar to the processes described on this previous slide. As they support the person facing a life-limiting illness and they should be afforded the same privacy provisions, carers are also required to notify their employer of an inability to work as soon as practical. When an affected employee is returning to work after an extended period of absence during treatment or after being a carer, there are some tips here. So meet beforehand to facilitate a smooth transition back. Be there to welcome the employee back and update if there are any changes in policies. Check in after a few days back and advise staff that their colleague is returning. Offer employee assistance program services. If on medical restrictions, check work health and safety considerations. So Appendix 4 here is the return to work checklist, which can help assist managers with that return to work processes. So I think we're going just okay for time. So we're just going to have a quick look at these case studies. I've broken these down very simply. So this is more of a what to do and what not to do. So the what not to do was an employee approached the CEO for 3 months leave as partner was diagnosed with a life-limiting illness and needed full-time care. The CEO took 3 weeks to get back to that employee. In the meantime, the employee ended up resigning as they were no longer wanted to work for a company that did not support them. And as it says simply here, that was 3 weeks of precious time that they no longer had with their partner. The second one here was a positive outcome. So it says, my mother was diagnosed with motor neuron disease, MND. As the disease progressed, Mum needed more support and she didn't like hospitals. My sister and I were lucky enough to be able to share in her care with our father, in a large part because of the support from our employers. Palliative care nurses visited regularly and assisted with medical advice and interventions, counselling, and the type of care that enabled her to stay at home until the end. With the in-home palliative care and support from employers to provide care 2 days a fortnight for my sister and I, we wouldn't have been able to do this. It means so much to have support at this difficult time. So they were very lucky they had, like I said, understanding employers, and between the brother and sister, they were able to get enough time to fit in around that work. Yes, but being delayed and not having understanding or how to support somebody straight up, you lose a good person because of not being considerate and being timely with how you can help that person. The last thing I want to cover today is probably one of the most important things we can do is self-care. Talking about death and dying with your employer, employees and colleagues, and supporting them through a life-limiting illness or supporting them through grief at the death of a loved one can lead to emotional stress. Having a strategy to care for your own needs will become very important. So looking after your physical health, nutrition, sleep, exercise, maintaining social contacts, so spending time with people who are important to you, looking after yourself emotionally, so having healthy ways to process your emotions, incorporating activities that recharge your emotions, and mentally keeping your mind sharp, practicing self-compassion, challenging yourself regularly. Spiritually, develop a deeper sense of meaning, develop a strong connection to the universe. So basically that means just doing something that's important to you that gives your life meaning. So really important to take away today is look after yourself and understand your rights at work, whether you are an employer or a manager, to support yourself and others. So that's us for today. Thank you so much for attending. It's weird, Polly, you can't see me and I can't see you, but I hope you've been able to get something from there. Were there any questions?
Yes, so thank you, Sharon. There's a final poll that you have. Would you like me to put that one up?
Sorry?
A final poll
Oh,
question that
yes,
you
so
had.
final poll. Yes, I do have a final poll. Sorry, I skipped over it. Yes, so
That's
after
fine.
this presentation day, actually probably the most important poll. So yes, after this presentation day, do you now feel you have a better understanding of life-limiting illness in the workplace and where to go for more information?
I'll close the poll shortly. I'll close the poll and share the results.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that at least 89% of you feel yes. For those who are unsure, once you go to the links for the toolkit that I will provide to you, I am sure that will be a big fat yes for you too, or I certainly hope so. And if you do need more information around palliative care or understanding life-limiting illness in general, you can go to our palcaretas.org website. We have all things information, all things around palliative care, as well as the broader aspects of palliative care. And so these toolkits will also be there. And looks like this is good timing because an alarm just started. Yeah. Sorry about that. Was there any questions before I race out the door?
Yes, Sharon. So what kind of supports are employees eligible for under EAP?
Our employee, they should be able to receive, depends on their own agreements, but they should be able to receive under the Employee Assistance Program, they would be entitled to a number of counselling sessions. But again, that depends on their own act and what their own Employee Assistance Program is providing, but they'd need to speak to an employer about that. But it's around that counselling services, and then the counsellor might be able to assist them further with further supports and guidance.
All right, thanks, Sharon. There's still time if anyone does want to submit any questions to today's presenter, Sharon King from Palliative Care Tasmania. And to remind everyone, today's webinar has been recorded. It is part of WorkSafe Tasmania month, which runs throughout the month of October. Recorded webinars will be made available on WorkSafe Tasmania's YouTube page come the end of this month.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Stephanie. I better go because there really is a fire alarm going off here, and as it's WorkSafe month, I better leave.
All right. No, thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
See you.